Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Homecoming. The key turned in the lock with the same satisfying click it always had, but something felt wrong the moment Michael Reyes stepped through the door. The silence wasn't the peaceful quiet of an empty house waiting for his return. It was the hollow emptiness of abandonment. Michael dropped his duffel bag and looked around. The family photos were gone from the mantel. Emma's art supplies weren't scattered across the coffee table. Jake's baseball glove wasn't on the couch where he always left it, despite Shannon's constant reminders to put it away. "Shannon," he called out, though he already knew no one would answer. "Kids." The deployment in Afghanistan had been brutal. 8 months of counterterrorism operations that had stretched his special forces team to their limits. But the thought of coming home to his wife and 2 children had sustained him through the worst of it. Shannon's letters had become less frequent in the final months, but he'd attributed that to her being busy with Emma's school activities and Jake's Little League season. He walked through each room methodically, his military training keeping his movements calm and purposeful despite the growing dread in his chest. Their bedroom had been stripped of Shannon's belongings. The kids' rooms were empty except for the furniture. Even their stuffed animals were gone. On the kitchen counter, a manila envelope sat propped against the coffee maker. His name was written across it in handwriting he didn't recognize. Inside, he found a letter from Edwin Wells, attorney at law, and a temporary restraining order bearing the seal of the county court. "Mr. Reyes, your wife Shannon Farley has filed for divorce and obtained a temporary restraining order against you, citing domestic violence and threats. You are hereby prohibited from contacting Mrs. Farley or the minor children Emma and Jake. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Mrs. Farley and the children are in a safe location. Do not attempt to locate them. Sincerely, Edwin Wells, ESQ." Michael read the letter 3 times, each word hitting him like a physical blow. Domestic violence? He had never raised a hand to Shannon or the children, never even raised his voice in anger. The accusations were not just false, they were deliberately crafted lies. He sat heavily at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals, where he'd helped Emma with her homework and taught Jake to tie his shoes. The restraining order was dated 3 days ago. Shannon had waited until she knew he'd be on his way home to file it. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. Michael pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Most were fellow soldiers, family members, or casual acquaintances. But there was one name that made him pause: Wade Shum. Wade had served with Michael in 2 different special operations units before leaving the military 5 years ago to start his own private intelligence firm. He was brilliant, resourceful, and completely loyal to the men he'd served with. More importantly, Wade understood that sometimes the system failed good people, and when it did, those people needed someone willing to work outside the system to make things right. Michael dialed the number. Wade picked up on the second ring. "Michael? Welcome home, brother. How was the—" "Wade, I need help." Michael's voice was steady, but Wade had known him long enough to hear the edge beneath the calm. "Someone's taken my family." Chapter 2. The Investigation. Wade Chung arrived at Michael's house within 2 hours, carrying a laptop bag and a grim expression. Michael had known Wade since their first deployment together 7 years ago. Where Michael was the tactical genius who could plan and execute complex operations, Wade was the intelligence specialist who could find anyone, anywhere, and uncover secrets people thought were buried forever. "Tell me everything," Wade said, settling into the living room that still smelled faintly of Shannon's vanilla candles. Michael laid out the situation: the empty house, the restraining order, the accusations of domestic violence. Wade listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes on his laptop. "No warning signs?" Wade asked. "No arguments before you left? Money problems?" "Nothing like that." Michael shook his head. "Shannon seemed distant the last few months, but I thought it was just the stress of me being deployed. She stopped writing as much, stopped sending photos of the kids. But I figure she was just busy." Wade's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Edwin Wells," he murmured. "Let's see what we can find about this lawyer." Within minutes, Wade had pulled up Wells' professional profile, his law firm's website, and several public records. "Interesting." Wells specializes in divorce cases for military spouses. Very expensive retainer fees. The kind of lawyer you hire when you want to destroy someone, not just divorce them. Shannon doesn't have that kind of money, Michael said. No, but someone does. Wade pulled up bank records. Not legally, but Wade had contacts in places that didn't ask too many questions. Your wife opened a new checking account 3 months ago. $40,000 was deposited in 2 installments. The payments came from Shore Enterprises. Michael frowned. Never heard of it. Shore Enterprises is owned by Travis Short. He's a real estate developer, worth about $50 million. Divorced twice, both times from military wives while their husbands were deployed. Wade's expression darkened. This guy has a pattern. Over the next hour, Wade painted a picture that made Michael's blood boil. Travis Short had built his fortune partly through legitimate business, but mostly through manipulation and exploitation. He targeted military wives, seducing them with money and attention while their husbands were overseas. He'd wine and dine them, pay for expensive gifts, and gradually convince them that their marriages were prisons. The divorce cases always followed the same pattern. False accusations of domestic violence to get restraining orders, keeping the husbands from defending themselves. Wells would file for emergency custody and maximum alimony while the husbands were still deployed. By the time the soldiers returned home, they were locked out of their own lives. Short keeps detailed records. Wade continued, showing Michael encrypted files he'd accessed through methods Michael didn't ask about. Photos, videos, text conversations. He documents everything. It's like he collects these women as trophies. Where's Shannon now? Michael asked. Travis owns a vacation home in the mountains, about 2 hours north. Property records show recent security upgrades, cameras, motion sensors, the works. He's not just hiding your family. He's protecting them from you. Michael stood and walked to the window, looking out at the yard where Jake had learned to ride his bike just last summer. His hands clenched into fists as he processed what Wade had told him. Shannon hadn't just left him. She'd been recruited as part of a deliberate campaign to destroy military families. There's more, Wade said quietly. I found forum posts, social media conversations. Travis Short doesn't just steal these women. He brainwashes them into believing their husbands are dangerous. Some of these women genuinely believe they're in danger. So Shannon might actually think I'm a threat to her and the kids? It's possible. Short's very good at psychological manipulation. He probably convinced her that your training, your weapons knowledge, your military background make you unstable. A ticking time bomb. Michael turned back to Wade. We need to get them back. Legally, you're screwed, Wade said bluntly. The restraining order ties your hands. Wells will drag this out in court for months, maybe years. Short has enough money to outspend you 10 times over. And every day that passes, your kids will believe more and more that daddy is the bad guy. Then we don't do this legally. Wade smiled for the first time since arriving. I was hoping you'd say that. Chapter 3, The Network. Michael spent the next 3 days learning everything Wade could uncover about Travis Short's operation. It was bigger and more sophisticated than either of them had initially realized. Short didn't just target random military wives. He had a network. Jody Wilkerson, a family counselor who supposedly helped military families cope with deployment stress, was actually feeding Short information about vulnerable marriages. She identified wives who were struggling, who felt lonely and forgotten, and passed their names along. Short would then engineer chance meetings at coffee shops, grocery stores, or fitness centers. Edwin Wells handled the legal side, but he wasn't working alone. He'd partnered with Clyde Waters, a corrupt private investigator who specialized in manufacturing evidence of domestic violence. Waters would plant hidden cameras, stage fake incidents, and even hire actors to play witnesses. The 3 men had been running this scheme for nearly 4 years, targeting over 20 military families. They'd perfected their system to the point where they rarely lost a case. It's brilliant, in a completely evil way, Wade explained as they sat in a diner across town, speaking in low voices. Short gets his trophy wives and their children. Wells gets his legal fees. Waters gets paid for his investigation services. And the soldiers get destroyed. What happens to the women after Short gets tired of them? Michael asked. Wade's expression grew grim. He discards them, usually after a year or two. Sometimes he helps them relocate with new identities if they stay quiet. Sometimes they just disappear from the records. Michael felt something cold settle in his chest. Disappear how? I'm still looking into that. But 3 of Short's former girlfriends died in accidents over the past 2 years. Car crashes, home fires, drug overdoses. Could be coincidence, but you don't believe in coincidences. Neither do you. Michael stared out the diner window at the traffic flowing past. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that predators like Travis Short moved among them. We need allies. How about some ideas about that? Wade said. You remember Jerry Garza from the 75th Ranger Regiment? Michael nodded. Garza had been a communications specialist, brilliant with electronics and surveillance. He's working private security now, still has contacts in military intelligence. And I think he'd be very interested in what we've learned about Short's operation. Over the next 2 days, Wade and Michael quietly reached out to other former Special Operations soldiers, men who had served with honor and returned home to find their own families targeted by predators. Men who understood that sometimes justice required action outside the legal system. Martin Cummings had lost his wife and daughter to a scheme similar to Short's. Ian Hendricks had been falsely accused of domestic violence by a corrupt lawyer working with his ex-wife's new boyfriend. Wilson Conklin had returned from Iraq to find his entire life systematically destroyed by people who saw his military service as a weakness to exploit. These men hadn't just been wronged. They'd been specifically targeted because they were soldiers. Because people like Short believed that military training made them dangerous and unpredictable, when in reality, it made them disciplined and methodical. We're not vigilantes, Michael explained to the group as they met in Wade's secure office. We're not going to beat them up or kill them. We're going to destroy them the same way they've destroyed us, systematically, completely, and legally. Ow! Hendricks asked. Michael smiled, and for the first time since finding that empty house, he felt like himself again. We're going to give them exactly what they've given us. We're going to isolate them from everything they care about, turn their allies against them, and make them face the consequences of their actions. The evidence we need to destroy them is in Short's vacation house, Wade added. The same place where he's keeping Shannon and the kids. He's documented everything, photos, videos, financial records. He's so arrogant he's created a perfect case against himself. So we get in the house, Cummings said. Not we, Michael corrected. Me. I get into the house. I retrieve the evidence. And I get my family back. Michael, Wade said carefully, if you violate that restraining order. The restraining order was obtained through fraud. Everything Short, and his people have done, is built on lies. Once we expose the truth, the legal system will work the way it's supposed to. Michael looked around the room at the faces of men who had fought for their country and been betrayed by the very people they'd sworn to protect. But first, we need to make Travis Short understand that he picked the wrong soldier to target. Chapter 4. Gathering Intel. Michael spent the next week conducting surveillance on Travis Short's mountain property, using skills he'd honed in Afghanistan to move unseen through the heavily forested terrain surrounding the house. The property was impressive, a modern log mansion built into the hillside with panoramic views of the valley below. More importantly, it was a fortress. Motion sensors covered every approach. Security cameras monitored the driveway, the entrances, and most of the exterior. A high-tech alarm system connected directly to a private security company that boasted response times under 10 minutes. But Michael had spent years finding ways into places that weren't supposed to be penetrated. Every security system had weaknesses, and Travis Short's arrogance had created several. The house relied on a single internet connection for its security network. The power came from a main grid with a backup generator that only covered essential systems. Most importantly, Short believed his money and legal protections made him untouchable. He'd grown careless. Through his spotting scope, Michael watched the house's routines. Shannon appeared on the deck each morning around 8, drinking coffee and looking out at the mountains. She seemed relaxed, even happy. The sight of her content in another man's house hit Michael harder than any physical blow he'd ever taken. Emma and Jake played in the fenced backyard most afternoons. They looked healthy and unharmed, but Michael could see they were confused. Jake kept looking toward the tree line as if he expected someone to emerge. Emma drew pictures constantly, and from what Michael could see through his scope, many of them feature a man in military uniform. They missed him. Whatever Shannon had told them, whatever lies Travis Short had fed them, his children still loved their father. Travis Short himself was exactly what Michael had expected: tall, expensively dressed, arrogant in his movements. He treated Shannon like a prized possession, always touching her, steering her movements, controlling conversations. When he interacted with Emma and Jake, it was with the forced enthusiasm of someone performing for an audience. On Thursday night, Michael's patience was rewarded. Short left the house alone, driving his luxury SUV down the mountain toward town. Wade's contacts had confirmed he was meeting with Edwin Wells and Clyde Waters, an exclusive restaurant 40 miles away. This was Michael's opportunity. He moved through the forest like a ghost, avoiding the motion sensors by following paths that animals had worn through the underbrush. The security cameras had blind spots, small gaps in their coverage that most people would never notice, but which were obvious to someone trained in reconnaissance. The house had a service entrance that the cameras couldn't see clearly due to a large pine tree that had grown too close to the building. The lock was electronic, but Wade had provided Michael with a device that could override most residential security systems. Michael was inside within 3 minutes. The house was exactly what he'd expected from a man like Travis Short. Ostentatious, expensive, designed to impress rather than comfort. But Michael wasn't here for the tour. He moved quickly through the main level, locating Short's office. The office was the house's nerve center. Multiple computers, a sophisticated communication setup, and most importantly, a large safe built into the wall behind an original Remington painting. Michael photographed everything: file cabinets, computer screens, documents left on the desk. But the real prize was the safe. Wade's electronic tools made quick work of the digital lock, and inside Michael found exactly what they'd hoped for. Travis Short had documented his entire operation. Folders containing photos and personal information for over 30 military wives. Financial records showing payments to Jody Wilkerson for counseling referrals and to Clyde Waters for investigation services. Most damning of all, videos of Short coaching women on what to say to their lawyers about their husband's supposedly violent behavior. Michael was uploading files to an encrypted drive when he heard voices from upstairs. Shannon was reading bedtime stories to the children. Her voice was strained, and Michael could hear exhaustion in it. Whatever fantasy Travis Short had sold her was wearing thin. Emma's voice drifted down. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home?" Shannon's pause stretched long enough that Michael's heart clenched. "I don't know, sweetheart. Daddy might not be coming home. But why? Did we do something wrong?" "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Daddy, just sometimes people change." Michael wanted to rush upstairs, to hold his children and tell them that Daddy was right here, that he'd never stop trying to come home to them. But revealing himself now would destroy everything. His children's safety depended on him maintaining operational discipline. He finished copying the files and moved to leave. But as he reached the service door, he heard a car in the driveway. Travis Short was returning early. Michael had 30 seconds, maybe less, before Short reached the house. The security system would show that someone had been inside, but it would take time to determine what had been accessed. Time Michael needed to disappear into the forest. He slipped out the service door and into the night, carrying with him enough evidence to destroy Travis Short's entire operation. But more importantly, he carried proof that his wife and children were safe, and that Shannon was beginning to have doubts about the lies she'd been told. The real battle was about to begin. Chapter 5: The Pressure Campaign. Wade's secure office had been transformed into a war room. Computer screens displayed surveillance footage, financial records, and legal documents. Maps covered one wall, marking the locations of Travis Short's properties and business interests. Phone records showed communication patterns between Short, Wells, and their network of accomplices. "It's time to start applying pressure," Michael announced to the assembled group. He'd called in additional support. Harvey Goodwin, a former Army intelligence officer who now worked as a freelance journalist, and Scott Blackburn, a computer specialist who'd left the military after serving with distinction in cyber warfare units. We hit them simultaneously on multiple fronts, Michael continued. Legal, financial, personal, and professional. The goal isn't just to stop them, it's to make them panic and turn on each other. Wade pulled up financial records on his laptop. Shore Enterprises has several major real estate deals closing in the next 2 weeks. If those deals fall through, Short loses millions and his investors start asking uncomfortable questions. What would cause the deals to fall through? Hendricks asked. Environmental problems, zoning issues, construction delays, Scott Blackburn said with a slight smile. Amazing how often those problems develop when the right people ask the right questions to the right government agencies. Harvey Goodwin opened his notebook. I've been investigating Travis Short for 3 days. Guy's got skeletons in closets he's forgotten about. Bribery, tax evasion, multiple sexual harassment allegations that were settled quietly. The only reason he's never been prosecuted is because he pays people very well to look the other way. What about Wells and Waters? Michael asked. Edwin Wells has been playing fast and loose with client funds, Wade reported. Clyde Waters has been manufacturing evidence in more cases than just divorce proceedings. Give me another week, and I can build criminal cases against both of them. Michael nodded. Good, but we need to be surgical about this. We expose them in a way that forces them to make mistakes, not just react defensively. The first phase began the next morning. Harvey Goodwin's article appeared in a regional newspaper, carefully worded to avoid libel, but raising serious questions about patterns in military divorce cases. The headline read, Are military families being targeted by predatory divorce schemes? The article didn't name Travis Short specifically, but it detailed the suspicious patterns Wade had discovered. Military wives suddenly filing for divorce with expensive lawyers they couldn't afford, restraining orders based on allegations that were never substantiated, and the curious tendency for these women to quickly relocate with wealthy new boyfriends. By noon, the article had been picked up on military news websites and shared thousands of times on social media. Military families began comparing stories, and several wives came forward to report being approached by strangers offering friendship and financial assistance while their husbands were deployed. The second phase launched that afternoon. Scott Blackburn's carefully crafted computer virus infected the systems at Shore Enterprises, introducing small errors into financial calculations and scheduling conflicts that delayed construction projects. Nothing obvious enough to be traced back to sabotage, but enough to create chaos and cost money. Simultaneously, Wade began feeding information to IRS investigators and state regulatory agencies. Anonymous tips about irregular financial transfers, questionable business practices, and potential tax evasion. Each tip was carefully documented and supported by evidence Wade had legally obtained or that had been provided by whistleblowers. The third phase was personal. Michael wanted Travis Short to know he was being hunted. On Wednesday evening, Short returned to his mountain house to find that someone had been there. Nothing was stolen, nothing was damaged, but subtle signs were left behind. A book moved from one shelf to another. A picture frame adjusted by a few degrees. The coffee maker left unplugged. The message was clear. Your sanctuary isn't safe. Short's response was predictable. He called Edwin Wells in a panic, demanding increased security. He hired additional guards and upgraded his alarm system. He began questioning Shannon about whether she'd told anyone where they were staying. He's getting paranoid, Wade reported after monitoring Short's phone calls. He's starting to suspect everyone around him. Good, Michael said. Paranoid people make mistakes. The pressure campaign intensified over the next few days. More articles appeared in military publications. Regulatory agencies opened formal investigations into Shore Enterprises. Other victims of Short's scheme began contacting lawyers about filing lawsuits. Most importantly, Jody Wilkerson cracked under the pressure. The family counselor who had been feeding Short information about vulnerable military wives found herself under investigation by her professional licensing board. When Harvey Goodwin called her for comment on allegations that she'd been violating client confidentiality, she agreed to meet for coffee. She's terrified, Harvey reported after the meeting. She thought she was just helping lonely women connect with successful men. She didn't realize the full scope of what Short was doing. Will she cooperate? Michael asked. She's already started. She's provided me with records of every referral she made to Short, along with copies of the psychological profiles she prepared on the families. It's a roadmap to Short's entire operation. By the end of the week, Travis Short's world was collapsing. His business deals were falling apart. Investigators were examining his finances. His co-conspirators were panicking and pointing fingers at each other. But Michael wasn't finished. The evidence he'd stolen from Short's safe was about to be deployed in the most devastating way possible. It's time for Phase 4, Michael announced. We turn them against each other. Chapter 6, Divide and Conquer. Edwin Wells was having the worst week of his professional life. 3 different regulatory agencies were investigating his law practice. The State Bar Association had received complaints about his billing practices. Worse, several of his former clients were claiming they'd been pressured into making false accusations against their husbands. When his phone rang at 11 p.m. on Friday night, Wells was already drunk and panicking. Edwin, we need to talk. The voice was unfamiliar, but carried an undertone of authority that made Wells instantly nervous. Who is this? How did you get this number? My name is Michael Reyes. You sent my wife to hide in Travis Short's house after filing false domestic violence charges against me. Wells sobered instantly. Mr. Reyes, you're violating a restraining order by contacting me. I'm required to report this to. You're not reporting anything to anyone, Michael interrupted, because you're going to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. I'm hanging up. Travis Short recorded you, Edwin. Every conversation you had with him about manufacturing evidence. Every discussion about coaching wives to lie about their husbands. Every detail about splitting the money from fraudulent divorce settlements. Wells felt his blood turn to ice. That's not. I have the recordings, Edwin. Hours of them. You and Travis laughing about how easy it is to destroy military families. You bragging about how judges always believe women who claim domestic violence. You and Clyde Waters planning how to fake evidence. The line was silent for nearly a minute. What do you want? Wells finally whispered. I want you to understand your situation. Travis Short has been documenting everything in case he ever needs to throw you under the bus. He doesn't see you as a partner. He sees you as an employee who can be discarded when you become inconvenient. Michael's voice was calm, professional, almost friendly. The FBI is going to raid his house next week. When they do, they'll find his entire archive of evidence against you. Your only chance is to cooperate with the investigation before they discover what a fraud you are. You're lying, Wells said, but his voice lacked conviction. Check your email in 10 minutes. I'm sending you 3 audio files and 2 videos. Just a small sample of what Travis has been collecting. Then decide whether you trust him to protect you when the federal prosecutors come knocking. Michael hung up and nodded to Wade, who sent the files from an untraceable account. Across town, Clyde Waters was receiving a similar call from Harvey Goodwin. Mr. Waters, this is Agent Tom Mitchell with the FBI, Harvey said, using a voice modulation app to disguise his identity. We're investigating a criminal conspiracy involving fraudulent legal proceedings targeting military families. I don't know what you're talking about, Waters replied, but his voice was shaking. We have evidence that you've been manufacturing false evidence in domestic violence cases. Video recordings of you planting surveillance equipment, staging fake incidents, and coaching witnesses to lie under oath. You can't prove. Edwin Wells has already agreed to cooperate with our investigation. He's provided us with detailed records of your activities. We're prepared to offer you the same deal if you're willing to provide testimony against Travis Short. Wells is cooperating. Waters' voice cracked. Mr. Waters, you have 48 hours to decide whether you want to be a witness or a defendant. If you choose to cooperate, call this number and ask for Agent Mitchell. If you don't, we'll proceed with the arrest warrants we're preparing. Harvey hung up and grinned at Michael. Think it'll work? It's already working, Wade said, monitoring the phone traffic between the 3 conspirators. Wells called Short 6 minutes ago. Waters called Wells 3 minutes ago. Short is about to receive a very interesting phone call. They didn't have to wait long. Wells, barely coherent with panic and alcohol, called Travis Short at 11:47 p.m. Travis, we need to talk. Right now. In person. Edwin, what's wrong? You sound. They have recordings, Travis. Video, audio, everything. They know about the whole operation. Short's voice sharpened. What recordings? Who has recordings? You have recordings. Reyes said you recorded our conversations. You played them back to me. Jesus Christ, Travis, you've been documenting everything. That's impossible. I never. Don't lie to me. I heard my own voice. You've been building a case file against me this whole time. The accusation hit Short like a physical blow. Edwin, calm down. You're drunk. Nobody has any recordings because there aren't any recordings to have. Then how does Reyes know about the coaching sessions? How does he know about the money transfers? How does he know about Clyde's fake evidence? Before Short could answer, his other phone rang. Clyde Waters was calling. I have to take this, Short said. Don't hang up on me, Travis. We need to meet tonight. All three of us. We need to figure out what we're going to do when the FBI shows up. The FBI? Edwin, what the hell are you talking about? But Wells had already hung up to take a call from Waters, who was in full panic mode after receiving Harvey's fake FBI contact. For the next hour, the three conspirators called each other in increasingly frantic cycles. Each conversation made them more paranoid and suspicious. Wells was convinced Short had been recording him. Waters was convinced Wells had already flipped. Short was convinced both of his partners were about to betray him. Beautiful, Michael said, listening to Wade's real-time interceptions of their calls. They're destroying each other. Short's about to make a run for it, Wade reported. He just called his pilot and put his private jet on standby. Michael smiled. Let him run. When he abandons Shannon and the kids, it'll prove everything we've been saying about his character. And when he runs, the kids go into state custody, pending the legal proceedings, Wade added. You'll get them back within days once the fraud is exposed. But Michael wasn't counting on the legal system to reunite him with his family. He had one more move to make, and it was the most dangerous yet. Wade, how long before Short gets to his jet? 2 hours if he leaves now. Then it's time for me to collect my family. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. Travis Short was stuffing cash and documents into a leather travel bag when he heard footsteps on the deck outside his office. Through the window, he saw a figure emerge from the tree line, tall, moving with the fluid precision of someone accustomed to danger. Michael Reyes stepped into the circle of light cast by the deck lamps, his hands visible and empty, his posture relaxed but ready. He looked exactly like what he was, a special forces operator who had come to retrieve what was his. Hello, Travis, Michael said, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. We need to talk. Short's hand moved toward the pistol he kept in his desk drawer, but something in Michael's stance warned him that would be a fatal mistake. This wasn't some panicked husband losing control. This was a professional who had planned every aspect of this encounter. You're violating a restraining order, Short called out, trying to inject authority into his voice. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, Michael replied. While you're on the phone with them, I'll be calling the FBI to let them know exactly where they can find all the evidence they need to put you in federal prison. Short's hand froze halfway to his phone. What evidence? Michael held up a small device. Your entire archive, Travis. Every video you made of coaching military wives to lie about their husbands. Every financial record showing payments to corrupt lawyers and investigators. Every photograph you took as a trophy of the families you destroyed. That's impossible. My safe is very nice. Expensive. Unfortunately, you trusted the wrong technology against the wrong person. The office door opened behind Short, and Shannon stepped into the room. She was wearing a robe over her nightgown, her hair tousled from sleep, but her eyes were alert and frightened. Shannon, go back upstairs, Short ordered without taking his eyes off Michael. No, she said quietly. I want to hear what he has to say. Michael's gaze shifted to his wife, and for a moment his professional composure cracked. She looked older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. But she was looking at him without the fear he'd expected, without the hatred he'd been prepared for. Hello, Shannon, he said simply. Michael. Her voice was barely a whisper. You shouldn't be here. The restraining order. The restraining order was obtained through fraud. Just like everything else Travis has told you about me. That's not true. Short interjected. Shannon, don't listen to him. He's dangerous. This proves what I've been telling you about military training, making these men unstable. Michael laughed, a sound without humor. Unstable? Travis, you've been targeting military families for 4 years. You've destroyed dozens of marriages and separated children from their fathers. You've built your entire fortune on exploiting the sacrifices made by people better than you. I've been helping women escape abusive relationships. Short shot back, but his voice lacked conviction. By coaching them to lie under oath? By paying corrupt lawyers to manufacture false evidence? By bribing investigators to stage fake domestic violence incidents? Shannon looked between the two men, confusion and growing horror on her face. What is he talking about, Travis? Short's composure was cracking. Shannon, don't listen to him. He's trying to manipulate you. This is exactly the kind of psychological games these military men play. Michael reached into his jacket slowly, telegraphing his movements to avoid spooking Short into doing something stupid. He pulled out a tablet and set it on the deck railing. Shannon, I'm going to play you a recording. I want you to listen to Travis's voice and tell me if you recognize what he's saying. Michael touched the screen, and Travis Short's voice filled the night air. The key is to make them believe their husbands are ticking time bombs. Military training, weapons knowledge, PTSD. These are all tools we can use to convince them they're in danger. Once they truly believe their husbands might hurt them or the children, they'll do anything to protect themselves. Shannon's face went white. Travis? What is this? Another voice responded on the recording, Edwin Wells. And the restraining orders? Travis's recorded voice continued. Essential. Keep the husbands away while we work on the wives and children. By the time the legal process runs its course, the families have been completely poisoned against them. Even if the soldiers eventually get visitation rights, the relationships are destroyed. Turn it off, Short said desperately. Shannon, this is fake. It's computer generated. These military guys have access to sophisticated technology. But Shannon was backing away from him, her hand pressed to her mouth in shock. Oh my God, what have I done? Shannon, listen to me. Short started toward her, but Michael's voice cut through the night like a blade. Don't touch her. Short spun back toward Michael, his face contorted with rage and panic. She's mine now. You lost her. You lost your children. Where are Emma and Jake, Shannon? Michael asked, his voice gentle. They're upstairs. Asleep. Shannon was crying now. Michael, I'm so sorry. I thought. He told me you were dangerous. He showed me articles about military suicides and domestic violence. He said you've been asking questions about life insurance policies before you deployed. I never asked about life insurance, Shannon. I've had the same policy since before we got married. I know. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I know that now. I've known for weeks that something was wrong, but I was so scared. And Travis kept saying that your husband was a trained killer who might snap at any moment, Michael finished. It's the same script he's used on dozens of other military wives. Travis Short was looking frantically between the tablet with its damning recordings and the cell phone he could use to call for help. But help from whom? Wells and Waters were probably already negotiating plea deals. His security team were employees, not soldiers. They wouldn't stand against someone like Michael Reyes. You want your family back? Short snarled. Come and take them. He lunged for the gun in his desk drawer, but Michael had been expecting that move for the past 10 minutes. By the time Short's fingers touched the weapon, Michael was already in motion. The confrontation lasted exactly 4 seconds. Michael crossed the deck in 2 strides, his hand clamping down on Short's wrist as the pistol came up. A simple joint lock, applied with precise force, and the gun clattered to the floor. Short gasped and fell to his knees, his wrist bent at an angle that made resistance impossible. Travis Short, Michael said calmly, you're under citizen's arrest for conspiracy, fraud, extortion, and about 20 other felonies I'm sure the prosecutors will think of. Daddy. All 3 adults turned toward the sound. Emma and Jake stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from their eyes and staring at their father in wonder. "Daddy!" Jake broke into a run, crashing into Michael's legs with enough force to stagger him. Emma was more cautious, but the joy on her face was unmistakable. "Mommy said you might not come home." Michael knelt down, still maintaining his grip on Short's wrist, and pulled his children against him with his free arm. "I will always come home to you. Always." Shannon was sobbing, her hand pressed against the wall for support. "Michael, can you ever forgive me? I destroyed our family. I believed him over you." Michael looked up at his wife, the woman he'd loved since college, the mother of his children. "Shannon, you were manipulated by experts. This wasn't your fault. But I should have known." "You couldn't have known. Travis Short has been perfecting his psychological manipulation techniques for years. He targeted you specifically because you're a good person who trusts people." Police sirens were wailing in the distance, growing closer. Wade's anonymous tip about a domestic disturbance had done its job. "What happens now?" Shannon asked. Michael stood, his children still clinging to him, Short still immobilized on the ground. "Now the legal system does what it's supposed to do. Wells and Waters are already cooperating with law enforcement. Short's entire operation is about to be exposed. And us." Shannon's voice was small, uncertain. "That's up to you," Michael said. "I love you, Shannon. I've never stopped loving you. But trust takes time to rebuild." The first police car pulled into the driveway, its headlights sweeping across the deck where one of the most sophisticated criminal conspiracies in recent memory was finally coming to an end. Chapter 8, Justice Served. The next 72 hours moved with the swift precision of a military operation. Edwin Wells, convinced that Travis Short had been documenting their criminal activities to use against him, turned state's evidence before the sun rose. Clyde Waters, believing that Wells had already flipped, contacted the FBI within hours to negotiate his own plea deal. By Tuesday morning, federal agents had arrested Travis Short at the county jail where he was being held on domestic violence charges. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved. The evidence Michael had stolen from Short's safe, combined with the testimony from Wells and Waters, painted a picture of a criminal conspiracy that reached into multiple states and affected over 40 military families. Michael sat in the waiting room of the county courthouse, watching Emma color pictures of soldiers while Jake played with toy cars on the floor. Shannon sat beside him, the distance between them measured not in inches but in the time it would take to rebuild trust. "Mr. Reyes?" A woman in a business suit approached them. "I'm District Attorney Pamela Ayala. I wanted to personally thank you for your assistance in this investigation." Michael stood and shook her hand. "I just wanted my family back, ma'am. What you've done is much bigger than that. Travis Short and his network have been operating for 4 years. We estimate they've defrauded military families out of millions of dollars and separated dozens of children from their fathers." She glanced at Shannon, who looked up from watching the children. "Mrs. Reyes, I want you to know that our investigation has confirmed that you and the other wives were victims in this conspiracy. Mr. Short and his associates used sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques to convince you that your husbands were dangerous." "I should have known better," Shannon said quietly. "You couldn't have known better," the DA replied firmly. "These men were professionals at exploiting the legitimate fears that military spouses have about deployment stress and combat trauma. They turned your love for your family into a weapon against you." A bailiff approached their group. "Excuse me, DA Ayala? The judge is ready for the short arraignment." Michael stood. "I'd like to observe, if that's possible." "Of course. In fact, you should probably see this." The courtroom was packed with reporters, military personnel, and family members of other victims. Travis Short sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by 2 public defenders. His expensive clothes and arrogant bearing had been replaced by the hollow look of a man whose entire world had collapsed in a matter of days. The defendant is charged with 37 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud, 14 counts of extortion, 26 counts of witness tampering, and 12 counts of child endangerment, the judge read. "What does the defendant plead?" One of Short's lawyers stood. "Not guilty to all charges, Your Honor. Bail is set at $5 million, the judge announced. Given the defendant's access to private aircraft and offshore accounts, he is considered a flight risk. As Short was led away in shackles, his eyes found Michael in the gallery. The two men stared at each other for a long moment. Short's expression held rage and disbelief. He couldn't understand how a mere soldier had destroyed his carefully constructed empire. Michael's expression held only satisfaction. Justice might be slow, but it was thorough. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Michael and Shannon. Cameras flashed as microphones were thrust toward them. "Mr. Reyes, how does it feel to have your family back? Are you going to sue Travis Short? What would you say to other military families who might be targeted by similar schemes?" Michael held up his hand, and the crowd quieted. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Travis Short and his associates targeted military families because they thought our service made us vulnerable. They believed that our time overseas left our families isolated and our judgment compromised by combat stress. He paused, looking out at the crowd of reporters and cameras. They were wrong. Our training didn't make us weak. It made us capable of fighting back when our families were threatened. Our experience didn't make us paranoid. It gave us the skills to uncover the truth when we were being lied to. Shannon stepped closer to him, close enough to show unity without claiming a relationship that still needed to be rebuilt. "What Travis Short and men like him need to understand," Michael continued, "is that when you target a military family, you're not just attacking civilians. You're attacking people who have sworn an oath to protect what matters most. And we don't forget our oaths when we take off the uniform." A reporter called out, "Will you and your wife be reconciling?" Michael glanced at Shannon, who gave him a small nod. "My wife was a victim of a sophisticated criminal conspiracy. She was manipulated by experts who exploited her love for our children and her legitimate concerns about my safety overseas. Rebuilding trust takes time, but we're committed to putting our family back together." "What about the other victims?" "Wade Chung, who helped me investigate this conspiracy, is organizing a support network for affected families. We're working with military family services to identify other victims and help them recover." As they walked toward their car, Shannon caught Michael's arm. "You didn't have to defend me to those reporters," she said. "What I did to you, to our family. What happened to our family was a crime, Shannon. You were as much a victim as Emma and Jake and I were. But I chose to believe him over you." Michael stopped walking and turned to face her. "You chose to believe a man who spent months convincing you that I was dangerous. A man who was supported by a corrupt lawyer and a private investigator who manufactured evidence. A man who had practiced manipulating dozens of other women in exactly the same way." He took her hands gently. "Shannon, if I come home from deployment and found you living with some random guy who hadn't planned this whole operation, who hadn't psychologically manipulated you for months, then yes, I'd probably be angry. But this wasn't about you choosing someone else over me. This was about you being targeted by criminals who saw our family as a source of profit." Shannon started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than guilt. "Can we really fix this?" she asked. "We can try," Michael said. "It won't be easy. We'll need counseling, time, and probably a lot of difficult conversations. But Shannon, I spent 8 months in Afghanistan thinking about coming home to you and the kids. I'm not giving up on that now." Emma and Jake ran up to them, holding hands and laughing about something only they understood. When they reached their parents, Jake looked up seriously. "Are we going home now, Daddy?" Michael looked at Shannon, who nodded through her tears. "Yes, son. We're all going home." Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, Michael sat on the deck of their rebuilt home, watching Emma and Jake play in the backyard while Shannon worked in her garden. The house looked the same as it had before his deployment, but everything about their family had changed. The legal proceedings against Travis Short and his network had concluded the previous month. Short received 25 years in federal prison. Edwin Wells got 12 years after his cooperation with prosecutors. Clyde Waters received 8 years and the permanent loss of his private investigator's license. More importantly, the investigation had uncovered the full scope of their operation. 43 military families have been targeted over 4 years. 19 divorces have been based entirely on manufactured evidence. 7 children have been permanently separated from their fathers based on false allegations. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Wade Chung. Support group meeting tonight at 7. 3 new families want to join. The military family support network they'd created had grown beyond anything Michael had expected. What started as a way to help other victims of Short's scheme had evolved into a comprehensive resource for military families dealing with all kinds of targeting by predators who saw their service as a vulnerability. "You're thinking about work again," Shannon said, settling into the chair beside him with 2 cups of coffee. "Not work. Community." Shannon smiled. Their marriage counselor had helped them understand that Michael's investigation of Short hadn't been about revenge. It had been about protecting his family and preventing other families from being destroyed. That understanding had been crucial to Shannon forgiving herself and Michael learning to trust her judgment again. "Wade called earlier," Shannon said. "The Department of Defense wants to use our case as the basis for a training program about protecting military families from civilian predators." "That's good. Maybe other families won't have to go through what we did." "Michael," Shannon said carefully, "I need to tell you something." Michael set down his coffee and gave her his full attention. They'd learned to be completely honest with each other, even when the truth was uncomfortable. "Travis called me." Michael's expression didn't change, but Shannon saw his posture shift slightly, not with anger, but with alertness. "From prison?" he asked. "His lawyer called. Travis wants to apologize. He claims he's found religion, that he wants to make amends with his victims." "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd discuss it with you." Shannon reached for his hand. "Michael, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want his apology. But I thought you should know he'd try to contact me." Michael squeezed her hand. "Thank you for telling me. And no, you shouldn't talk to him. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry he got caught." "That's what I thought too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Emma was teaching Jake to properly throw a baseball, her serious 9-year-old face focused on the mechanics of the motion. Jake was trying his best, but mostly just enjoying time with his big sister. "Do you ever regret it?" Shannon asked. "The way you handled everything? Part of me wonders if we could have just gone through the legal system, fought the false charges in court." Michael considered the question. "We could have tried. Maybe we would have one eventually. But by the time the legal system finished sorting out the truth, Emma and Jake would have been teenagers who'd spent years believing their father was dangerous. Short would have moved on to other families while we spent months in court. So no regrets?" "None." Michael's voice was firm. "I use my training to protect my family and stop criminals from hurting other families." That's exactly what that training was meant for. A car pulled into their driveway, Harvey Goodwin arriving for their weekly dinner. The journalist had become a close friend over the months, helping other families tell their stories and ensuring that predators like Travis Short couldn't operate in the shadows. "Uncle Harvey." Emma and Jake abandoned their baseball practice and ran toward the car. Harvey emerged with his usual armload of presents: books for Emma, who'd inherited her father's love of reading, and model airplanes for Jake, who decided he wanted to be a pilot like his daddy had been before joining the Army. "How's the investigation going?" Michael asked as Harvey joined them on the deck. "Better than expected. We've identified at least 6 other operations similar to Short's in different parts of the country, all of them targeting military families, all using variations of the same psychological manipulation techniques." "6 operations," Shannon repeated. "How many families?" "Hundreds. Maybe more." Harvey's expression was grim. "The good news is that law enforcement is taking this seriously now. Your case proved that these aren't isolated incidents. There's a pattern of predators specifically targeting military families." As if summoned by their conversation, Wade Chang's car pulled up behind Harvey's. Wade emerged carrying a laptop bag and wearing the expression he got when he'd uncovered something important. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "All of us." They gathered around the kitchen table while Emma and Jake continued playing outside. Wade opened his laptop and pulled up a series of documents. "I've been tracking the money from Travis Short's operation," he began. "Where it came from, where it went, who else might have been involved." And Michael asked, "Short's operation was bigger than we thought. He wasn't just working with Wells and Waters. He was part of a network of at least 12 people spread across 6 states, all targeting military families using similar methods. Shannon felt her stomach clench. Are you saying there are more people like Travis out there? I'm saying Travis Short was middle management, Wade replied. The real architects of this scheme are still out there, and they're already rebuilding their operations. Michael leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. You're talking about a coordinated, nationwide conspiracy to target military families. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And, Michael, some of these people have connections to foreign intelligence services. They're not just stealing money. They're systematically destroying the families of American Special Operations personnel. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed what Wade had said. So what do we do? Shannon asked. Michael looked at his wife, his children playing in the yard, his friends who'd become family through their shared fight for justice. 6 months ago, he'd come home to an empty house and a false restraining order. Now he had his family back. He'd found his purpose, and he'd built a network of people committed to protecting military families from predators. We do what we've always done, he said finally. We protect our families. We expose the truth. And we make sure that people who target American soldiers understand exactly what they're up against. Emma's laughter drifted in through the window as Jake finally managed to throw the baseball in a perfect arc. Shannon smiled and squeezed Michael's hand. Harvey began making notes for his next investigation. Wade started planning their strategy against a conspiracy that was bigger and more dangerous than any of them had imagined. But Michael felt only satisfaction. Whatever came next, whatever enemies emerged from the shadows, he was ready. His family was safe, his skills were sharp, and his purpose was clear. Travis Short had made one critical error in his calculations. He'd assumed that military training made soldiers vulnerable to manipulation, that their loyalty could be turned into a weakness. He'd been wrong. Military training made soldiers into protectors. And when protectors were threatened, they didn't just fight back, they won. The war for military families was far from over. But Michael Reyes had proven that soldiers don't forget their oaths when they take off the uniform. And some battles are too important to lose.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.